Welcome to the Collab Podcast. My name is Michelle.
And my name is Devin.
On this podcast, we explore concepts of self-mastery and community collaboration
through in-depth panel discussions and intimate interviews with dance's most prominent figures.
Yeah. See my peanut butter jelly snack, pull it ride, bushy painting. That's my sunshine when it's raining. That's my boo, yeah. When I'm all alone, she pulled through.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Collab Podcast. Our guest today can be described with many words: leader, choreographer, dancer, respected colleague, uncle, mentor. But those who really know him lovingly refer to him as Papa. Best known as owner of San Diego-based award-winning team Super Galactic Beat Manipulators, Papa J fathered a team from its roots, nurturing dancers and upholding a culture of inner growth, strength, and discipline. Dancing for nearly 22 years and considered a master in his craft, Justin J. Vaughn is the epitome of community. Jay's career accolades include Formality, Urban Effects, and of course, SGBM. Although Jay doesn't consider dance a profession, his mission is to continue to provide support for the community and pay it forward. Justin J. Vaughn has been and continues to be an integral figure in the dance community, and it is a privilege to have him as our guest today. Please welcome Papa J.
That might be the nicest things anybody's ever said about me in like continuous sentences, so I'm a little overwhelmed. Thank you for that. Well written and really like thoughtful intro. Thank you. I'm really delighted to be here and really excited to speak with the both of you. It's been a little while, so I'm looking forward to catching up and chatting.
Well, it's really exciting for us because just like the intro said, I mean, we wrote it because we really wanted to, it's hard when you have a career as long as you did in the dance community and trying to condense it in a few sentences, but we really wanted to capture the essence of you. And that is you just are and continue to be an integral part of the dance community. And, I feel privileged enough to be able to name drop and say that I know Jay.
Yes, I'm the same. Like any chance that I get to say that I danced on SG or that I, had you as a director, I always take up that opportunity.
Oh, that's very sweet. And I certainly don't think of myself in any of the maybe accolades, if you want to call them. I just think of someone who's just myself as just I've been around a long time and I've had a lot of great experiences and worked with a lot of great people. So I feel privileged to say that that's been my journey, not because of anything I've necessarily done, but just because of, the cards that were dealt, and really lucky to work with amazing people. So thank you.
When we were prepping for this episode, I Googled Justin J. Vaughn, and I came across pieces, YouTube videos and, Instagram posts and Facebook posts. So I've, in my Google search have pieced together an idea of, where it all started. But I'd love to hear straight from you how dance inspired you, how you got started, what your first experience was like, and how it progressed into becoming this community icon.
Oh my gosh. Oh, please don't use the term icon. This is a lot to absorb. I will start by saying that, before there was dance, there was the music. And my mom is Filipina and my dad is he's Caucasian. And, on weekends, if my dad was working on the cars in the garage, he was pumping out some Led Zeppelin and some Journey and some Queen. And if my mom was inside cooking or cleaning, it was Diana Ross, it was Gloria Estefan, it was Lionel Richie, it was Whitney Houston. So I could just go back and forth and just have like a nice, like a little bit of everything from the 70s and the 80s. And I enjoyed and learned to appreciate all of it. And then, in the 90s, when I was a young kid, I discovered hip hop and R&B. I think I was like 7 or 8 years old. And TLC was like the very first album that I like kind of purchased because my friends were like, listen to them. And I was like, oh, this is different, and kind of reminded me of Janet Jackson, who I've been a lifelong fan of. So, and that kind of evolved into watching music videos and kind of mimicking music videos because I just love the music. And I guess it's one of those things you don't realize, but then you're like, I'm actually kind of good at mimicking these music videos. I'm not horribly off from these professionals. And then as you get older, you find friends who are kind of like you, right? Like they love the music, they love to dance, and whether we're any good at it at all doesn't really matter. We just kind of like to do it together. And so I was about 14 when I joined my official like garage team, and they were called Hypnotize. I have not said that word in a long time, but this was this was like late junior high. I think this was around Bell Junior High. And it was like 12 or 13 of us, and we would practice in garages and backyards. And I was just like the newbie in the group, so learning and whatnot from like my friends who were choreographing. And we would do, like the school talent shows and perform at debuts and any chance we got to just have fun. That's kind of what we did, to predominantly Filipino schools growing up in predominantly Filipino neighborhoods. So it wasn't really uncommon to just like dance and go to family parties and celebrations where dance was just a part of it. So, and then from there, I guess I got some encouragement to do more and take it a little bit more seriously. And so I went to Mira Mesa High School for one of those like auxiliary competitions, and they had like cheer and letters and flags, and out comes Mira Mesa's all male dance team. And then I was like, wait a minute, why doesn't Morse have one of these? Hold on. And they were really good. And from there, my first goal became, I think I was a junior in high school at the time. I was like, Morse needs to have one of these. I will do whatever it takes to figure that out. And I did. I went straight to the vice principal and I said, how do I get one of these? Because they have one and I'm really jealous. And we have a lot of talent at Morse. And I went through the steps of like, finding an advisor, really just building it from the ground up. And lo and behold, it happened. And so I founded Morse All Male's first all-male team back in 2001, 2002 was the very first year. So next year will be the 20th year for Morse All Male. So, and they're still going well, which is kind of crazy to me that team is 20 years old. Makes me feel old, but also really proud of that legacy. And from there, I joined Formality when my last like few months of high school, because I was encouraged to like do it more outside of school and from Formality, and then the whole community got exposed to the greater community from there. So yeah, I'm trying not to take like half an hour to explain this story, but those are probably the details that most people haven't heard. From there on out, it was really, really amazing to be part of like a much larger community. So yeah, those are the roots.
That's incredible. And I mean, to have taken the initiative to say, I want an all-male team, how do I get one?
Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, if it hadn't been you, would Morse have an all-male team right now? I mean, maybe eventually, but it would have come around a lot later.
Yeah, I think maybe a little bit later when there's a bit more exposure. There wasn't social media or any really platforms to allow exposure at the time. YouTube, I don't think it existed at the time. But our phones weren't very smart either, so I don't think we had a lot of platforms. We were still playing Snake on our Nokias, like honestly. So yeah, I think we would have gotten there eventually because, like I said, the talent was there and the love for dance existed in the school. But I wanted to make it happen because I was passionate about it. So.
Well, and I think that, and you probably don't know this, but you paved the way for inspiring other teams to form, other all males and all females even, because at the time, I mean, I went to Mount Carmel High School. I think I'm still older than you, but we're generally around the same age. And I was with the, KJ Gonzalez crew and Sherilyn Rubia and those guys, and they were really into dance. But, it was very, like you said, because we didn't have social media, we were in our bubble. And I think a lot of people didn't know what we were doing in our own school, in our own town. And so I think it's really remarkable to hear that you really took the initiative and you sort of just paved the way. And it's so amazing to hear that it's 20 years now. It's going to be the 20-year anniversary of that team.
Yeah, I went to visit the school for the 15th anniversary, and to find that there were like little brothers and like younger cousins of people that I knew, and of former dancers that used to be on SGBM. So it is really crazy. Yeah, and when I think back, like at all the amazing talent that the San Diego community has produced, like, to find out, I guess there's a lot of dancers I didn't realize who got their start on Morse All Male. So that's really cool to me that Morse All Male might have been like their first like thing into some sort of like structured dance team. Yeah, it's really cool. Something I'm really, really proud of. So
when you started Morse All Male, did you direct and lead it as well?
Yeah, I did. Very limited experience from like a choreographer standpoint for sure. So I think that allowed me to just figure that component out of just like what that looks like. And of course, at the time, you're kind of regurgitating the things you see in like music videos and media, because again, there wasn't social media. So you really had music videos to follow. And maybe you knew of some choreographers, or watch some of the shows. But what I also did was I picked a co-captain. So that was Elmer Aquino at the time. So he was a year younger than me. So that way I ensure that when I graduated the following year, there would be somebody to take over. He was also a member of Future Shock at the time. So he also had some experience. And then Elmer's older brother is Emerson Aquino, who is also a, veteran in the community, highly respected. So he was one of the directors of 220 at the time, and I didn't know anything about 220 when I started All Male. So this is kind of something Elmer suggested. And Emerson he's a character. He still is. I think he's the exact same guy I met 20 years ago. So we brought him on as kind of like our part-time coach. He helped provide some of like the training, helped provide some of the structure. So he was there like a couple times a week to help, but the rest of it, like I had to learn to lead and facilitate. And that was really interesting because when you're, 16, 17, and then you have like 6 or 7 of your like close personal friends are a part of this. And then I had another like 8 or 9 guys that I'm just meeting for the first time and trying to like switch the dynamic of being like the captain and the leader for your friends who like don't want to listen to you at that capacity, while you're trying to like get the buy-in of these people you're just learning to meet and establish a dynamic. That's a lot for any teenager to take on. It still is in 2020, and I don't think we appreciate that enough. So, oh my goodness, I learned so much about myself and my leadership, about my skills and where I needed to really like focus to get this right. And I don't think I did a tremendous job my first year. It was a huge learning situation for me, but I certainly took those lessons as, I progressed in my dance career. So.
I went to high school with Emerson, and it's so funny. I never knew that he was, this dancer in the community. So I knew him as just sort of my buddy Emerson. We would joke around and we would, laugh all the time. That's the one thing I remember about Emerson is just laughing a lot with him because he was so bubbly and energetic. And then I didn't find out until later because I think Devin ended up dancing for him. Or taking a class. I can't remember, Devin, you can fill in the details, but he turned out to be this like, well-known dancer in the community. And I was like, what? How come I didn't know this?
Yeah, I think it was when I was dancing with PGN, formerly Funks SD. And at that time, he was leading Funks SF.
Yes. Yes, that makes sense. Yeah.
That's, oh gosh. Anyway, funny world. So talk to us, Jay, about how your experience, your early experience propelled you to come up with the idea for Super Galactic and where that all originated from.
Yeah. So I danced on Formality for a few years and then Urban Effects a few years thereafter. And so they were definitely two different kind of approaches to like running a team, two very different intentions. Like one was a competitive team, that was Formality, and Urban Effects was geared much more towards like industry and like gigs, which we did, a lot of club gigs. And that's where I got exposed to like KJ, which you went to high school with. So I got exposed to a lot of like professional dancers because a lot of them were working in the industry at the time. And I was in college and, really just trying to balance life at San Diego State, my dance life at Mesa College, because I went there to take just dance classes and then like 2 jobs. So there's a lot going on at that time. I don't know how I did that as a 20-year-old. Like the energy just blows my mind, the things that I had on my plate. But eventually the time came for me to kind of like narrow out like what I wanted to do from a dance perspective. And so when it came to SGBM, Kevin Brewer, who is like mostly known for Jabberwockies, but he had lived in San Diego at the time. He was on Culture Shock for I think a season or 2. And I think he was really just motivated to start something of his own. And if you've ever talked or met Kevin before, he's just one of these just geniuses and one of the most creative, visionary people that I know. And I don't say that about very many people at all, but that's exactly how I revere him. So he and his 2 best friends, Joe Larat and Phil Tyag, they were in the process of like working with other teams, and Phil had already started Boogie Monstars in Sacramento. And so basically Kevin wanted to start a team of his own. And so he would invite San Diego dancers to a studio out in East County, out in La Mesa. It was called Dance Elements back then. And we would just kind of like vibe and session and just kind of follow him and whatever he wanted to do. It was just a bunch of us from different teams, some of us without teams for a summer. And it was just a really unique experience. And then come that November, 2005, he's like, I want to make this official. So he founded SGBM on just the idea of like wanting a platform to really just teach and kind of pour into dancers regardless of their experience. And I was still in Urban Effects at the time. And then KJ, his girlfriend at the time, Chrissy, who we were all close, and a handful of other veterans from the community decided to like flock and gravitate towards KB and SGBM. And so it didn't take long. I was kind of like co-managing Studio Effects at the time. So I would like be in the studio while they launched their rehearsals at the front desk, like, locking up the studio after them afterwards. And I would just watch them and go like, wow, this is something, I think this is what I want to do now. I want to kind of go back to being a student after doing gigs and lots of competitions and finding like some really good success in those things. But I'm just like, I think I really want to focus on the community aspect and like being a student, back to being a student of dance. So it wasn't long before, it was the summer of 2006. So about 8 months after SGBM formed, that I kind of jumped shipped and auditioned for SGBM, myself, Ving Wen, and a few other dancers. We all kind of like gravitated in that direction. And that started my 9-year journey on SGBM was through that time, and just the want to like figure out what was important to me in dance. Cause I had been driving up to LA, for the audition here and there. And I quickly learned it wasn't something I liked. It wasn't something I wanted. And I wasn't willing to like drop out of school to pursue that. Learned a lot from dancers who were in the industry, and just how like fickle and finicky a lot of it can be. And when you drive 2 hours up to LA for what can feel like a 15-minute process because you're just not what they're looking for, because you're too short, or they already have people who look like you, or you don't do a body roll the way they want, like it's the smallest things. And it's like, that's the industry, not in its entirety, but it can feel that way. And they just kind of move on to the next person. And you're like, man, 5 hours on the road for that can be really exhausting. I mean, it was, but I don't regret any of it. And I learned a lot, and I met a lot of amazing people who were in the community up in OC and LA as well. But it's kind of where I just decided that I wanted to focus on community. And so I think that it was that experience in my early 20s that I just said, you know what, I don't want to make a career out of this. I love to teach classes, and I was teaching regular classes at that point at the newly opened Culture Shock Dance Center. And I was one of the hip hop instructors at a local salsa studio and teaching private classes. I enjoyed that way more than any audition or anything else. So that was it for me in terms of like, okay, community is like where I want to invest, because I at that point had so many great experiences, and I wanted to like replicate that for others and protect that. We worked really hard to like create what we had. So.
I mean, you and so many others cultivated such an amazing dance community, and I think it's still continuing to grow and thrive. But I would love to hear a little bit about what Kevin's vision was initially for SGBM, and how you either continue to carry out his vision, but also, I guess, bring in some of your own ideals.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's funny. I think if you asked KB, he didn't really have like a long-term vision for SGBM. I think it really was his like platform to do something different and bring people together. I think he recognized that like what we were doing wasn't like what the community had at the time. So if you think about 2005, I think there was a spectrum kind of forming at the time, whereas prior a lot of us were mimicking what we saw in media, and that was, if you watch a DVD from like Fusion 2003 or something, we all kind of look like what we saw in music videos, or we were really grounded in like hip hop, like true hip hop, but that was probably the minority. I would say. And then the likes of like KJ, who was super popular at the time because of his influences in LA, he was really inspiring the community to speed up. And so choreography got faster and it got flashier, and musicality and nuance started to play a little bit more of a role there. And then on the other side of the spectrum was like Sean Evaristo. When they made their debut at Bust a Groove and Gen 2 won, it was like they just didn't look like anything else. And so for them to take the trophy and people to really like dissect, like there's something really special and unique about that. That was not like any of the other performances. And so he helped, like, I guess, familiarize everyone with the concepts of like texture and like more storytelling, and that was not something we saw in the community in the same way from my point of view. And so there was these like the spectrum growing of like people who are really flocking towards trying Sean's style, and teams that were choreographers who were mimicking KJ style, and then there was everybody who was still there in between. And I think KB acknowledged, like, with his background, there was something else there missing. And that's kind of what SGBM was. But the very cool thing about it was like KJ was a part of SGBM. So then it became also about like, I guess, capitalizing on what KJ did, what Kevin or KB brought to the table. And then there was Lando Wilkins, who was probably under KB's wing for a little while. And so his movement and his approach kind of like was in that sort of arena. And then there was Ben Chung. So the four of them were like our original overlords, if you will. We refer that term to referred to like our leaders. They were the four like main choreographers and like artistic heads of the team, and four very different approaches. And so we got to really blend that together. And I think it really just was about learning and having fun. And because of like the popularity of a lot of these dancers and choreographers, we had easy access to performances. You got invitations to perform at some of like Culture Shock shows, at Bust a Groove, because, or I guess the debut would have been Body Rock, as it transition in 2006. But Anna Sarau was part of the group as well. But yeah, if you were to ask like, hey, what was the long-term goal? There probably wasn't one there. So when Ben and KB left for JABA, because they got picked up by America's Best Dance Crew in 2008, then the team fell on KJ's hands. By then, Lando had kind of like broken off. He'd moved and really wanted to pursue like some of his own work. And at the time, I was already doing admin work for the team, because I had like assisted with that process on Urban Effects for a little bit. And so the team fell on basically KJ became the artistic director and I became the admin director. And we kind of provided a little bit more structure. So if you also know KB, structure really isn't like something he like seeks per se. And it's not something that I'd say he thinks is his, forte. Whereas like I'm a little more type A. And so if I see inefficiencies or maybe an easier way to do something, I'm definitely going to speak up. So I think that's where my influence probably started with the team, where KJ was just not, frankly, wasn't interested in doing any of that work. And, I don't blame him. He's a phenomenal dancer, choreographer, and that's where he invested his time. But I helped provide like the first version of the contracts, and like help book the studios and provided the schedules and booking the shows and managing the money. And so that's kind of where it kind of started, and all of that with KB's, blessing. So when I wrote the first iteration of the contract, like I reviewed that with him. And in terms of the core values, all of that went back to all the things I learned. And it was pretty clear after dancing and even knowing him at that point for probably about 5 years. I'd met him in 2002 or 2003. So we'd known each other for a good 5 years at that point. Like I knew what he was about. And I knew it was, part of my job to kind of protect like the diversity in our artistic approach was super important. The experimentation and like the environment of learning was really important to us. There were some rehearsals where all we did, where KB would literally just like follow the leader, and all we did for like an hour was like just copy what he was doing. And we not that you wouldn't call it dance, but it was like, it was training in a different way. And sometimes that was like all we did for rehearsal, so there's that component of just like a space where you're learning and you're adapting to something that's new and you're trying new things. Cause that's what it was for us. And going back to, when I said wanting to be a student, I was very proficient in KJ's choreography. That's where I was most comfortable. Those are the pieces I got blocked in. When I tried to learn Ben and Lando stuff, it was just like, my body was like, I don't know what I'm doing. And I've been dancing for several years and this is really difficult. So there was that, right? And a lot of us were segmented off that, like dancers who dance with KJ, dancers who dance with KB, and then nobody danced with Ben. So we were all like, okay, his stuff's just hard, period. The fact that I look back on a Vibe 2008 performance and I got casted in 2 of Ben's pieces was just like, I still question. I watch myself and I'm like, no, I wouldn't have casted myself in those pieces. I should not have been Ben's mirror at the front. Like, no. I still laugh when I see that video. but that's what it was for me, is to like take those things, because that's what made us unique, right? That's what made us special. That's where, when you had the culture shocks and the urban effects and even the other like competitive teams, 220 and Formality, and San Diego didn't really have very many teams at the time. We were kind of our own thing. And it was important to protect that, because all the teams in San Diego were just amazing in their own right, super well respected. And you knew what you were getting yourself into as a dancer. Like, you knew that was the style you maybe wanted to pursue. And in 2005, 2006, I think we established another like corner of that space, or a space of our own, where dancers could go like, oh, look, that's not like something that currently exists. That might be something I want to pursue as well. And so while I'm not like KB at all, and I don't have that creative genius, I knew that I could find a way to like replicate that environment. And so that became like my mission. And you do that through dance education, and you do that by emphasizing your values, and you do that by bringing in people who, know what they're talking about from different lenses and different perspectives. So like I'm not going to go out there teaching popping. I'm a terrible popper. I'm going to find somebody who knows that and knows the history, and is going to bring that experience to the team, because at the time, not a lot of teams were pursuing that, and that's not right or wrong. If you're a team who knows what they want and understands like what they want to produce on stage, and if certain elements aren't a part of that, you're just not going to pursue that as part of your training. But for us, it was like, let's try everything. Let's try as many things as we can. And even if we have one or two dancers who are highly proficient, like, let's have them share with the rest of the team. And if we pick up on styles that we're really excited about for that year, we're going to work on them, and maybe we'll show a little bit of that on stage, and that was kind of where the idea of like our all styles pieces came in. And so I think at some point, I think it was probably 2010, 2011 when we started adding locking and popping and waving and a few other like things that we'd done in the past. But it was more of a intentional approach to like the training, in a world kind of post, not only post KB and Ben, but post KJ at that point, because KJ retired in 2009. He got married to Chrissy, and then the team fell onto my shoulders. And then we promoted Ving, who was kind of KJ's assistant. So then Ving stepped up as artistic director at the time. And then he moved on to pursue Jabba in Vegas a couple of years later. And that was always the mission. We were always like, how do we continue to replicate what makes SGBM with each generation? So, man, I can go on and on. I'm realizing I'm not stopping. So I'm going to stop right there.
I love it. No, seriously, because, I think, and particularly me, because I'm not as immersed, I didn't get to, dance with, a lot of these teams, because my first experience into the community was opening the box with, my sister and my brothers. And so I got to know the community by association with them. And so I think a lot of people like me don't know a lot of this background, and so it's just, I'm just like, you should write a book.
I've heard that before. I'd be too afraid of getting the details wrong, because I know that I'd be like criticized for that's the wrong year, and I'm like, that probably is the wrong year. I'm old. I didn't document all this stuff the last 20 years. No, it's funny. Back in the day, if we remember what a Zanga was, I used to blog during these years to really share my experiences. I need to look up and see if that Zanga still exists, because I used to document a lot of those times back then.
That would be amazing to uncover.
Yeah.
All right. So at what point, so you spent nearly a decade running, this award-winning, world-renowned team. At what point did you say it's time to pass it on and sort of move on from this chapter in my life?
Yeah, I think there is probably a multifaceted approach to that. One maybe being the obvious one being is just like is getting older. There are just some harsh realities of like getting older and your body just not agreeing with some of your decisions anymore. And like I said earlier, like how I juggled technically 3 jobs, school and rehearsals at 20 years old, doing like 4 hours, 5 hours of sleep a night. And I did that for probably 5-6 days a week. I guarantee that would kill me today, guaranteed. And now at my age, now I'm 36, like if I don't get 7 hours of sleep, it feels like I got hit by a bus, basically. And so there's just the reality that your body just doesn't agree anymore. And it's not that I'm old and not that we're old, Michelle. It's just, I also didn't have the capacity to like put in the work or the training to keep my body up at that level, to keep up with the 19-year-olds who just innately have a little bit more energy. You know what I mean? Like don't get me wrong, Chris Hemsworth and I are the same age, but like, his profession's different than mine. So he gets to train and, be fit and all that stuff. But I work retail and I spend a lot of time on the freeway. And so I think there's a part of me, and I've been with the same company now for 20 years and wanted more for my career. And I'd always put my career kind of like number 2 to dance. Even when I was running SGBM, as executive director, even when I was like producing Body Rock for a few years, and I was a general manager at the time. So I was like the head of a store, and I was responsible for running a, multi-million-dollar business. Don't tell them, like they were number 3 in my list of priorities. And I put everything I could into all of the plates that I was spinning. Anything at some point when you look at, your financial well-being, your health, not just your physical health, but your mental health, I had to say like, you know what, I think I'm at a period where I'm ready to kind of transition out of this kind of what definitely felt like a full-time responsibility running an organization like SGBM. And then the other thing to consider is just like, well, who's going to take over? So the structure that I created, not intentionally per se, was, I felt I had been with the team for so long that executive director was the best title for me to help like just oversee all aspects of the operations. But as I got older, I was not interested any longer in contributing artistically. I had so much talent on the team. Like, of course, they should have the opportunity to develop their skills around leadership, choreography, teaching. All those things are different skills that need to be refined and developed. So knowing that I could help provide that, I knew that was probably my primary role and how I wanted to invest my time. So I had artistic directors and admin directors who worked underneath me and captains. And so they were really doing a lot of the work. And my job was to make sure they felt good about how they approached their work. Not unlike how I approached my work in my career life, right? As a general manager, I'm a generalist. I have to be good at everything, but I don't do everything. My team does, and I have to make sure they feel good about how they do their job so that, they feel like they're contributing and they want to continue to be here. So I learned a lot about kind of cross-pollinating the learnings from each of those aspects of my life. But then I was like, well, now I want to learn more and do more in my career because I know I'm capable of more, and I don't want to be a general manager forever because it's a tough job. And so when I found that perfect group to pass the team over to, I decided to break up the structure, and instead of creating like more of a pyramid, I created a circle of equally distributed authority from established dancers and leaders on the team that I had known and loved and respected for many years. And so I put a handful of them in charge, and it was a shift in the dynamic for sure, to kind of go from like one person at the top to kind of this shared responsibility. but that was kind of my thought process in terms of like the best way to manage this. That way nobody had to quote unquote fill my shoes. I didn't want anybody to have the pressure of being compared to the work I was doing, at least not one person. So if I could spread it out, they could work together to figure out what that new dynamic would be. I thought that was the best way to approach it. So I announced my retirement a year in advance and picked those individuals almost a year in advance so that we could spend the entire season together working on that transition so it would feel more seamless. And, you know, I basically stepped away almost entirely after that point. And I did get to focus on my career. And that's what led to where I am now. Like I moved to Long Beach a year and a half ago because I got offered a promotion for a multi-unit role. So I went from a general manager to supporting 24 stores now from like a visual merchandising perspective. And it really is like my dream role and the dream like department I want to work for. So yeah, I got to put work at the top for the first time in a long time. So yeah, it was kind of crazy when I think back about it.
Everything about your journey so far seems so incredibly thoughtful. And what I particularly remember about having you as a director was you had a very specific and thoughtful approach when it came to directing. And I don't know if you had developed a certain philosophy around directing, but I would love to hear like what your thoughts were kind of as you were closing out that last year with Super Galactic. Did you get any pushback? Like, no, Jay, like, please. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of that. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as you're kind of just getting ready to wrap up that chapter.
Yeah. I think when it comes to leadership, I think there's definitely a thoughtful approach at this point. You know, maybe even at that point in my career, that was 6 or 7 years ago now. Was that? I don't even know how many years it's been. It's been a few years. I wholly believe in like servant leadership, that if you are a leader to serve yourself in any capacity, then you probably need to reconsider your position and why you are in that position to begin with. I'd like to believe that I did everything I could to emulate the behaviors that I would want in leaders, and in hopes that future leaders would learn from me, because a lot of my leadership style was developed by obviously all the things that I saw, both in the dance community and in my professional career. As you know, I started with my company as like a part-time associate at 16 years old and didn't know anything. And just like in dance, when you're new, you just kind of follow the rules and you do what you're told because you're excited to be there. And then as time goes on, you learn that some things you were exposed to were fantastic and the right way to do things and a really positive way to do things. And then there's the polar opposite of that. And you get exposed to things that you're like, yeah, that probably wasn't great. I'm going to make sure that that's not something I do in the future. So you learn a lot, and I learned a lot about what to do and what not to do. And so my style, and it still does, right? I especially believe in like being a lifelong learner. And so while I've had 20 years of leadership experience, I don't think I'm done by any stretch of the imagination. And those are some of the things that I tried to like instill on all of the leaders that got to work for me, in terms of like how we do this and why we do this. We're not here for trophies. If you want a trophy, go find a team that's already winning them. I bet they've got a great formula to win those trophies, and that's not to say that they're good or bad at anything. It's just like, if that's what you want, go get that. That exists, I think I was very intentional about like what was important to SGBM, and like knowing, like I said earlier, if you're signing up to be a part of SGBM, these are the things that are going to be a part of your experience because this is what's important to us. and good leadership for me was important to the SGBM experience. When I hand select directors or I hand select captains, I want them to be people who are invested in the big picture, invested in everyone else as part of their journey, because in the dance world, you don't get formalized leadership training that you might get in schools or from other organizations and companies. Like sometimes companies will help, pay for those things. But if you didn't go to school and get an education in business admin or leadership or, IO psych, dancers just kind of making it up. With all the best intentions in the world, they're making decisions for other people that impact other people's lives in different ways. And most of the time, they have no idea what they're doing. And that's still to this day, and I didn't know what I was doing in the beginning. So by the time my last year came around, I felt much more confident in who I was and what my leadership style was. And I didn't expect the future directors to adopt everything, but I had hoped at least that I had emulated enough of the right behaviors that they could learn and say, this is what worked about Jay's style that I want to continue. But here's also what I want to bring to the table as we transition from generation to generation, because the needs of each generation has been different. And that's something that I don't think unless you spent a long time in the community, that dancers in 2005 wanted different things than dancers in 2009 compared to 2013 and 2018. And 3 years from now, the dancers in, 2023 will want different things and need different things than the dancers of today, right? So learning to adapt and what works and learning to adjust as you go is super, super important. So I think if I were to describe my approach as thoughtful, it really just is, it really comes down to just being adaptable and just really being invested in what that particular group needs at the time.
I think it's really incredible. I love that Papa J is a nickname, but in every essence of the word Papa and Father, as parents, our goal is to nurture our children and promote inner growth and strength and discipline and all of these things that you're talking about and adaptability and things like that. And then you sort of let them go and you let them free into the world. And you really have, in every essence of the word, fathered SGBM and then said, okay, here it is. I trust that you will do the right thing. And I trust that you'll be successful and go off out into the world and adapt. And I love making that connection because, it's not just a nickname. It's not just Papa. You really are Papa J in every meaning of the word.
Yeah, it's funny when Jacqueline Escocio, she was a Gen 5 member who came on in 2010. Didn't take long for her to kind of just start calling me that. And then it kind of it spread like wildfire. But I don't know what it was about the time, to be honest. At 2010, gosh, how old was I? 27, 26. I was not old enough to be considered anybody's dad. And I certainly didn't act like I should have been anybody's dad. So I'm sure at the time it was probably more of my control freak tendencies and my anal retentive behaviors that gave the illusion or facade that I'm a dad-like figure. But I'd like to think that I worked to kind of really earn that, because I took that nickname as kind of a term of endearment. But I think I like to think my dancers knew that I absolutely cared about them more so their lives outside of dance and not necessarily just what we did in rehearsals or what days were performance days. But I very much cared for my dancers and wanted to see them do well. And if SGBM wasn't going to be their final dance home or dance experience, I was 1,000% okay with that. And it was like, well, how can I help you get to whatever it is you want to do? Like, if you want to pursue industry, like, here's what I can do to support some of that. And if the other areas that I don't have experience in, let me like provide you with a connection to help you with that. And that's what that became for me. I was excited to see them go out into the world. And even if they retired as a dancer and then pursued their dream career, because I will always remember my dancers wanting to cram some homework in between run-throughs and all that stuff. And I get it. And I was always grateful that they, came to rehearsal in spite of feeling really stressed out about that test tomorrow morning, and happy to give them a moment to do some do some cramming in between. I wanted them to succeed in whatever they were pursuing. So
I actually remember, as part of my audition process, you asked everyone what their goals were, whether it be dance related or personal. And I was like, this is weird. Like, why do you want to know my personal goal? This has nothing to do with how I dance. But it was a unique experience for sure. And I think that kind of just speaks to, again, the thoughtfulness that you were trying to provide for your dancers in the way that they wanted to pursue dance.
Yeah. Well, thank you. That's cool that you remember that. Yes, this is a question I ask everyone for sure.
I feel like Michelle and I would be terribly remiss if we did not take up consultation upon all of the youth leaders today. What are some of the challenges that you see for junior directors right now? And what advice would you give them, especially navigating during COVID? They might not be in school right now. They might not have access to their team members. What can they be doing right now to prepare themselves to get back into directing?
Yeah. Gosh, these times are so different, aren't they? I have kind of pondered on this for some time because, I currently, I guess for lack of a better title, I own SGBM, but I'm not actively running the team. And that's, Sai Bongalos' job now as executive director. But I've had conversations with him and other leaders in the community about like, how are we handling these times? And the one thing that was immediately apparent is that there really isn't a one size fits all situation. Because I think when you think about the dancers, like before we're dancers, we're people. And as people, like, we all have different needs and wants, and we respond to our current state a little bit differently. So I think one thing to kind of like just keep at the forefront is just everybody's like health. And obviously physical health because there's COVID, but like mental health. I think I've come across a lot of dancers, young and older alike, that are, kind of faced with some really tough times around. It's hard to be home for them for a myriad of reasons. And it's hard not to be connected to communities that they're so used to seeing on a daily basis or a weekly basis. And it's absolutely a valid feeling to, be upset or be sad or have a myriad of responses to where we're at. So I think it's really just be cognizant of like where your team's at as a whole, and just make sure that everybody feels comfortable expressing themselves and has a safe place to express how they're feeling without being ridiculed or being judged, because there are dancers out there who are surrounded by people who are like, COVID, no big deal. I like being home. I'm a homebody. This really hasn't impacted me. That's certainly the reality for a lot of people too. But then if you're surrounded by people who are like that, but you're like suffering on the inside, and your mental state isn't the same, then you're less inclined to like speak up and seek help. And, so I think there's that to be really mindful of. On the other side of that, I think with so much time at home and probably a lot more time in front of screens, there's also a lot of resources out there that if you have the capacity to engage, more podcasts have been forming, and there's been a lot more online instruction in a new number amount of topics that you can pursue that you could help develop your leadership skills. So there's more resources now for leadership training, diversity and inclusion training. Creatives are finding other mediums to get dance education training out there. I think once upon a time, Steezy was kind of like the first, or probably like the first of its kind to get really popular. And now there's other companies and other organizations who are taking similar approaches. Building Blocks platform has recently evolved to be more inclusive of like leadership training and the other creative components outside of like a normal dance class. So the number of resources, I think, has increased exponentially. I think it's just now a matter of like learning what those are. And if you're looking to continue to develop your skills in an environment where you can't be around people, then I think that's a really good, maybe a path that you can pursue.
That's great advice. And I think the important thing there is to remember that it's not a one size fits all situation. Because I think we have a tendency, not just in the dance community, but just in our own, personal, minds, we have a tendency to think that one solution is going to fix everything. Like if I do this, it's going to fix everything in my life and everything is going to be okay. And so I think it's really important that you pointed out that it's not a one size fits all situation. It's going to be different for everyone, but as young directors in the community, know that you have, as Jay said, plenty of resources out there and people that you can reach out to help find a solution that fits your team's needs. I think that that's really important. All right, Jay. So we've gotten to know a lot of history about SG. We've gotten to know a lot of history about you. And now it's time to switch it up and do what we love to do in our podcast, and that is the rapid fire. So I'm going to set a timer for 45 seconds. We've actually extended it this season. It used to be 30 seconds, so you get a little bit more time. The idea is just to answer as quick as you can off the top. First thing that comes to mind. Devin's going to go through a series of questions, and we'll get through as many as we can. And it'll give our listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit better.
Okay.
All right. So let me start the timer. Devin, you pull up the questions.
All right. I'm ready.
Okay. And go.
Student or teacher?
Student.
Choreo or freestyle?
Choreo.
Favorite food?
Lasagna.
If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
Tokyo, Japan.
One word to describe your dance style.
Angular.
If you could write a book, what would it be about?
Dance, community history.
What's your dream job?
Dance instructor.
Favorite SGBM medley?
Retirement home.
Time. That's my favorite medley. I was hoping you would say that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I was like, these are hard. And it's funny, I've been asked some of these before and I could never come up with a definitive answer. I'm like, did I just say angular, you guys? Angular. Please delete that. Look, all of a sudden, all adjectives from my vocabulary escaped me. So
it was great. It was great.
There's a couple on here that we didn't get to that I think that are a lot of fun. Would you rather live in the ocean or on the moon?
Oh gosh, I'm terrified of large bodies of water, but the moon sounds boring. So the ocean. I can't swim that well, so oceans scare me. Like being in them, looking at them. Thank you, amazing. But
yeah, I feel the same.
Yeah.
I can't swim.
What did you eat for breakfast this morning?
I don't eat breakfast. This cold brew, it's not chocolate milk, I promise. At 2 p.m. is the first thing I've consumed today. I'm terrible.
So do you intentionally do intermittent fasting?
Yeah, probably for a good 10 years now. It started out as just like, I don't have time to eat, or I'm not good about picking the right foods in the morning. And then it negatively impacts all the plates I'm spinning during the day. So I'm at a place now where I only eat one meal a day now, right around 3, 4 o'clock. And then I might snack a little bit in the evening, but it just kind of works for me. So
more and more people are doing that. Devin and I both fast. I mean, more recently we just started, but I found that it has helped me immensely because just as you, Jay, I was always making really bad decisions in the morning, first thing in the morning. It was just I had really trouble with impulse control. I'm like, breakfast, that means I can have a donut.
Yeah.
So this really helps kind of control my day.
Yeah, and I've been a night owl since I was in high school. So eating later in the day, actually I'm much more productive at night. It's crazy. From 10 p.m. to midnight, I will let's work out, let's repaint the house, reorganize the furniture. Let me plan all my life's major choices in the evening. But if you talk to me at 8 in the morning, I pretty much want to scratch your eyes out and don't talk to me, don't look at me. So that probably has something to do with it too. It's don't want to eat, don't want to do anything in the morning.
So it wasn't my imagination that as rehearsal got later and later, you derived a greater energy.
No, I thrived off of I was like, oh, I know the dancers are tired. It's midnight, but I'm I could keep going, but that only changed as I got older. Then when I was hitting my 30s, and it was oh no, now I need to go to bed too. So.
So are you now a night owl? Are you are you an early bird night owl now? How has age changed that for you?
I've adjusted a little bit. I don't stay up till 3 a.m. anymore on a regular basis, where 3 a.m. was pretty common. I'm probably back to 1:30 now is my normal bedtime. And then I wake up around 7:30. So yeah, still doing the 6-hour thing, which isn't so bad, but no, I'm still more productive at night. And I would do anything to change it, to be more productive in the morning, but I've just accepted who I am at this point, good, bad, and different.
So what is now on the horizon for Jay now that you've actually moved to Long Beach, taken the leap and left San Diego? Which is totally, I think we were talking about this earlier, is something that you didn't see yourself doing. And, I think a lot of people around you are like, what? You're leaving. Why? San Diego is great. So I'd love to hear what's on the horizon for Jay. And also, what's the differences that you've seen so far living in Long Beach versus San Diego?
Yeah, so, I definitely moved up here for my career. So that'll continue to be at the forefront of the decisions that I make, and really enjoying that experience and this new role. And I'm really enjoying Long Beach. I could have chosen to move anywhere in LA, and I got so many great recommendations for Long Beach, not only to its proximity to San Diego, because it's a hop on one freeway pretty much, and it's a much easier commute, but Long Beach really just has a lot of charm, and it really has its own identity. And not to say that a lot of LA doesn't, but it doesn't. There's just a lot of, there's hundreds of cities in LA County and even parts of LA. And there's certainly a lot that makes that special and unique. But for me, there's a lot of Long Beach that reminded me of San Diego. So I'm enjoying my time up here. I live about 3 miles from the ocean. So that's a plus for sure. Not nearly as hot down here as it is, 30 minutes north from like downtown LA and the valley and stuff. So yeah, I think my time up here has been about putting my career first. And then, over my years, I've certainly got to know a lot of the dance community up here. So a chance to reconnect with friends up here, take some classes at studios I haven't been to before. It's crazy, as long as like a snow globe has been around. I didn't take my first snow globe class until February. So right before COVID happened, I was like, yeah, I should probably finally go to the studio. Then I found out where it was. I found out on one of my regular commutes, I was driving by it like 3 times a week. And I was like, it was there the whole time. And I just never bothered to look it up. Shame on me. So I'm super excited to get back into classes. That's definitely what I want to do, is just take a weekly class to just, like get back in that environment again. And again, even if my body doesn't agree with me all the time, there's just nothing like walking out from a great class experience. It's been all like hazier and smoggier up here because of the fires and whatnot. So my allergies are reacting so much. So, and I'm by an open window to try and get some light in. So
no problem.
It's funny, even getting well into my 30s, I was like, oh, I just developed a new allergy to something I didn't have 10 years ago.
No, isn't it funny? And the funny thing, I was talking about this with Devin the other day, is that, because I'm 40, but I still feel like sometimes that I'm like 30, but then I'll like take a class and I'm like, no.
Right?
I'm 40.
Well, A, you look amazing for 40. B, that is no joke. No joke. My mind is convinced I am much younger.
Yes.
And then my body wholeheartedly reminds me that
no.
you need to knock it off. Knock it off.
Yes.
The struggle is real. A part of me just wants to fast forward to my 40s so that I just know for sure that I shouldn't do things. But I'm still learning, like, yeah, you almost passed out the last time you tried to do that. So, don't do that again. I'm like, damn it. I was a couple years ago and I decided to pick up a personal trainer because I wanted to get back in shape. And the trainer was a friend of mine. But we were doing like our initial test, and I don't eat breakfast. So how dumb of me to show up for a 10 a.m., evaluation. She's like, let's see how many push-ups you can do in 60 seconds. And I hadn't done push-ups in eons since I did a really good number of push-ups. I did like 35 push-ups in 60 seconds.
Wow.
It's bad for not having done push-ups in a while.
Yeah.
I stood back up and blacked out.
Oh no! Oh my gosh!
And it was just the most embarrassing, like funny thing that ever happened. And my friend was like, "Did you eat this morning?" I was like, "No." And he's like, "Why?" I was like, that's a really good question, actually, now that I think about it.
Oh my gosh.
How dumb was I? So
That's
that wouldn't have been a problem if I was 20 eating pizza every day.
And carne asada fries.
All the time. And
Wow. So are you still doing your training?
No, the idea there was to really take again, an education on the right form, how to do things in the most efficient and effective way so that I could do things on my own. And so one thing during COVID that I need to get back into because I dropped off a bit. So I do have some weights in my apartment. But at least I feel like I've learned how to create the right routines for me and the right form to do things. And especially how diet impacts your overall health and well-being. So yeah.
Yeah. No more carne asada fries and pizza. I guess not as often, right?
Yeah.
Not at 3 a.m.
No, those are like a once every other week now, for sure.
Yeah.
Because I've learned, and I found a really good place where like adobada fries are my favorite. Like,
yeah. Oh my gosh, me too.
Yeah. Oh my God. And no matter when I eat them, weekends, weekday, I always feel like I have to take a nap after because there's no nutritional value. And at 36, your body's like, what are you doing? Like, that's terrible for you. Now go to sleep.
Your body can't handle it.
Yeah. No nutrition.
Oh my gosh.
I know that you've been working, during the time of COVID, but I'm interested to hear, have you picked up any hobbies or have you done any home improvement, or what's sort of your quarantine activities that you've been doing?
Yeah, I've lived here for over 18 months now, and I only this year started to fully furnish my apartment. So I've had like not an empty living room, but I've had a couch there, and I left my living room space open because if I had guests in the past, I would just blow up the air mattress and they would stay basically in my living room where there would have been furniture. So I'm like, why get furniture? Because then I'd have to figure out where to put the air mattress, right? Like, this is me at 36. But I moved up here looking for a studio, like a small space, like low maintenance. I'm a pretty minimalist kind of guy when it comes to my space. So when I landed a 1-bedroom because I couldn't turn it down, and I'm like, I love the place, but now the downside is I have like all this space that I didn't want in the first place. So I finally said, okay, let's furnish this thing. So I spent hours and hours, late night, of course, online, like shopping for furniture. And so I finally got a dining room table for the first time because I would just eat in my room. But then I became a plant dad because a lot of my friends are plant parents, and I had a little more time on my hands to kind of learn and what's that like, and like what kind of plants might I be into. So I bought all this furniture and then I put plants all over them. And those have been my two things. So it probably started back in April. So I'm glad that I furnished most of my apartment now. Got into the plant thing, which has been really cool. It gives me a little extra something to kind of take care of and learn. I've learned a whole lot about myself and my ability to take care of living things. Not been great. Not a great start, by the way. But it also just gives me a little bit of joy in there, right? Something like just relaxing to do. I've learned that plants should not be like a chore. It should be something you just just genuinely enjoy. So if anything, it's been those two things, making my place feel more like home and actually putting things on the walls. Clearly not in this room that I'm in, but in other rooms where I've started. But now I own, I think 25 plants now, where I started with 1 or 2 back in March. So I've also killed 5 since. So some of them don't like my space, or I didn't give them enough humidity, and some of them have been real divas, and I had to let them go. Honestly, they just weren't a right fit. So that's been my quarantine life.
That's amazing. Out of personal interest, I definitely have to ask, what kinds of plants do you have? Or if you want to take us through some of your favorites.
Yeah, so, I like to keep it simple. I like a good pothos and all of their varieties because they're hardier. Funny enough, there's one cultivar of them that just does not like my place. So I keep killing the Enjoy pothos. It's the one that has mostly white leaves. Of course, it's the prettiest, fanciest one. I'm on my way to killing my second one. I've tried low light, more light, less light, different water, different soil, you name it. I've tried to be a good plant dad, and it just wants to die. But I have probably 5 or 6 different pothos. I think I've been attracted to the vining plants a little bit more. I just like to watch them grow. Like a vining plant, you can like see them grow, and you can kind of like let them hang or let them grow up on things versus like the like more bushier type plants. So those and syngoniums. My favorite plant is it's an albo or albino, like variegated syngonium. So it's green. It has a lot of like white splashes on it, and the leaves are shaped like little arrows. And they're like stockier and longer, and they still vine. It's a beautiful plant, and it was kind of expensive. I don't know. I should have been spending all this money as a new plant dad, but it was so pretty. I was like, yeah, okay, let's just not kill you. The pothos I can replace because they're like $10, but this one I've got to keep alive. So, but I've learned the high humidity plants or like the really needy, like more tropical plants. I have to work a lot harder to keep alive. So I'm struggling with them just a little bit.
What's your recommended starter for someone who, like myself, has like zero green thumbs?
Yeah, I definitely start with the pothos then, because they are inexpensive. They're easy to find. You can find bigger ones, smaller ones, so you'll spend anywhere from like $8 to $30 on, different size plants. So those are easy, I think. And then, there's other easy plants like that I haven't tried. Like I don't care for succulents and things, so I didn't bother with those so much. But start with the pothos.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
It's funny because before I had my son, it was, the joke is like, oh, have a plant or have a pet, like take care of something living before you have a child, right? And I think I didn't try it until after I had my kid. But when I actually did try it, I tried it with a succulent. I had to give that succulent to Devin and was like, I've killed off this succulent. But thankfully, my 7-year-old is still alive. So.
Yeah. Good news. Children are a little sturdier and hardier than plants.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Like I said, I've killed 5 or 6 plants at this point. So, you could try a ZZ plant. A ZZ, you only have to water like once every 3 weeks, and they'll work in like the darkest low light situations. So.
Oh, that's good to know. ZZ. Okay. ZZ or pothos.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm going to Google those right after this.
Yeah.
I love plant talk.
Yeah, right. That's because we're older, and the kids watching this are like, what the heck is this? Fast forward. I've had enough of these old people and their plants.
They'll get to know the joy of having plants someday.
Yeah, they mock us today, but in 10 years, they'll wish they would have had a pothos to take care of instead of a goldfish, I promise.
Oh my God, that is hilarious. All right. So Jay, what is a day in the life of Jay Vaughn look like these days?
So as I mentioned, life really revolves around work. So I live alone in my apartment in a little more suburban area of Long Beach. So I live really close to Cal State Long Beach. Got really great neighbors, so I get to interact with them on a regular basis, kind of coming and going. So it's given me a nice little sense of community up here. Otherwise, I spend so much time on the freeways because, as I mentioned, I support 24 stores in the LA area. So unfortunately, I live in the most southern part geographically of all of the things I support. So I drive up into LA, in and around like the downtown areas and in the valley, and even as far as like Camarillo, Ventura, on a regular basis. So lots of time on the freeways and in traffic. So I learned to be as productive as I can on the road. So I got myself a big boy car that can like make sure I'm feel really comfortable with a little bit of technology, so I can host like touch bases and even sometimes some conference calls on the road. But for now it's really like a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday for me, which is not something I was used to. And then when I come home, so I don't cook because I think cooking for one just is I just not interested in eating either. I have to cook a really small meal, which sounds like doesn't make sense, or I'd have to eat it like 2, 3, 4 times. And I don't like that idea either. So I don't cook, and then plus no dishes. So all of the good reasons to not cook are there for me. So I don't. But I'm a big foodie, and LA has no shortage of amazing food to try. So one of my favorite things about Long Beach is really just tapping into like the communities here. Like there's a really big Cambodian community here. So like trying Cambodian food for the first time, because that's not something I think I maybe learned or had exposure to when I was in San Diego. And everything down to like all the basics. Like I'm out here, like I need to find the best ramen and find the best lasagna and the best boba and you name it. I want to find the best version of it. And since I drive all over LA on a regular basis, I have no problem taking like a 20-minute detour to find the best. So I don't really do anything with that information. Like I don't write Yelp reviews or Google reviews. I just like to, I just enjoy a good meal. And I, fortunate enough to be able to like purchase meals on a regular basis and eat out almost every single day. So that's really most of my time. And then I try and catch up with shows and catch up with friends and family in the evening. So still lots of like Zoom calls and FaceTimes. My sister and her family are in Vegas, and she has 3 young kids, and my best friend and his family are down in Chula Vista. So whenever I can make time to drive up to Vegas or drive down to San Diego. Obviously a lot less this year, but normally at least once a month, I would normally go down to San Diego and just catch up with people. So yeah, not exciting in the slightest, especially during COVID times. I mean, if I've got, a good pillow to rest my head and some good food to satisfy me, I'm pretty low maintenance. So
I want to quickly circle back because you said that you are usually on the hunt for the best of the best.
Yeah.
So in your opinion and expertise, what would you say are the best places to get lasagna, boba, and ramen? Because those were the ones that you mentioned.
Yeah.
In San Diego and in Long Beach.
Ooh, gosh. San Diego, I always felt was a step behind with some of the categories, unfortunately. And San Diego has some incredible food, no doubt. Boba, gosh, boba was one of them, right? I think for a while when Kung Fu tea was like new and exciting, I would have said Kung Fu tea was probably like cream of the crop in San Diego. But since I've been gone in the last 18 months, I don't know if like we've leveled up since. And I think Kung Fu has just really expanded from a franchise. So now I just feel like their quality has gone down a little bit, but they're still pretty good. And I'm sure I'm forgetting about a more obvious choice. So shame on me because I haven't had boba in San Diego in a long time. As for lasagna, I never found a spot in San Diego that I was in kind of love with. I leaned heavily on like homemade lasagna. So like my mom used to make an amazing lasagna, and I have lots of aunties and uncles who are just incredible cooks down there. But I live really close to a pizzeria / like Italian spot that I can walk to here in Long Beach. So their lasagna is fantastic. And so I probably it's a once a month thing for me as well. So if you know a good lasagna spot in San Diego, let me know, because winter time's coming around, and that's when I usually like crave like the warmer dishes, just like ramen. Like I can't eat ramen during the summer because it's just too hot. But like in the winter, I will eat it every single day. So Tajima might seem like a super basic answer, but for the record, I've been going to Tajima since it was like one restaurant and no one knew about it. And now again, they're kind of a chain and everyone's like, well, Tajima. I like that Rocky place better or whatever. I'm like, I actually think Tajima's still better than Rocky. I think if you just know what you want in your bowl, like if you just know the broth is better somewhere, or their version or slice of pork belly is just done a little bit better, or if you know you like the thicker, thinner noodles, I don't think there's a wrong answer per se. The other place I like in San Diego, I forgot the name of it, but it's right by Mitsuwa, like in that same parking spot off of the 163 or parking lot.
Is it Nishiki?
Yes, Nishiki. Yes, Nishiki was probably the other place that I frequented. That was a common place me and like other dance directors would go to like get caught up. It was always over a bowl of Nishiki, for sure. So here, though, we have a lot more like bougie ramen spots, like the $20 bowl spots, like, you know, we're about the experience, not just the food. So there's a spot up here called Silver Lake Ramen, which I started up in the LA area. And there's now a restaurant here in Long Beach, which is really good. And then there's, I think it's called Akuma in, I think it's in West Hollywood. Their bowl was one of the best bowls I'd had in the past like year and a half. So, but same thing, like super hipster and done up for the gram versus like, you know, the rest of the spots in San Diego are just kind of like, you know, they don't go to that extra mile for the ambiance thing. It's more about the food. So I low-key miss just places being about the food and less about paying for the decor and paying for the lighting and stuff, because $20 for a bowl of ramen is a lot of money. So
yeah, definitely. Oh my gosh. Well, I'm hungry.
And I'm due in an hour. Yep. Mm-hmm. It's true.
But you know, this has been so much fun and so lovely to get to know you in this way. I do have one last question for you. And that is, you know, kind of given the current state that we're in with COVID and, you know, a lot of racial injustices and also just sexual misconduct, you know, It's really been a dark time for the dance community. I'd love to hear from you, your perspective on what's good, what's positive in the dance community right now. What can we highlight?
Yeah, you know, I think given all of the things you mentioned and just how quickly a lot of that kind of unfolded for us, I think I have just been amazed at the amount of support that I've seen from the community. You know, whether it's like really wanting to learn and understand how racial injustice impacts the community and really like leaning into Black voices to lead that discussion where we may not be educated enough or where our perceptions have led us or, you know, down like the wrong path. So support in that way, support from you know, a financial perspective, given how COVID has impacted a lot of the studios, like all of the GoFundMe pages and the awareness around trying to help businesses stay afloat. I've just seen a lot of tremendous support around that as well, which has been great. And you know, in regards to the sexual misconduct, just like opening our eyes to like the reality of like what we were not seeing for so many years, and just the fact that these victims felt like they had to stay silent for so long. So seeing the community really rally around those who've been impacted by that situation and believing them and wanting to do right by them to ensure that these aren't ongoing problems in our community. So I think I have not seen a lack of support, at least right now. And in so many of these things, we have a lot of work to do. So it's not to say that like what we've done, especially when it comes to, racial injustice and sexual misconduct, we still have the journey ahead is a long one, and we're all going to have to be participants of being educated and unlearning behaviors, and like really taking a growth mindset on how we can do better for all of us. But at least from what I've seen so far, it's all been like a great start. So that's the thing I think I'd say I'm most proud of from the dance community during these times. So
thank you so much for your insight, and thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I want to let Devin say a few last words, but I personally just want to thank you for taking this time to talk to us. I meant it when I said it earlier. In my eyes, you are a community icon, and I love that we got to spend this dedicated time with you and hear from one of the best in the dance community. So thank you so much.
Oh, it was an absolute pleasure to be here. And it certainly hasn't felt like an hour and a half by any means. So it felt like just catching up with old friends. So thank you for inviting me. And I'm definitely glad we could have this conversation. So thanks.
Yeah, I just want to chime in and say thank you, Jay. I, in comparison to a lot of dancers, spent a short amount of time under your direction. But in that time, I can say that you are one of the most generous, most kind, most thoughtful people that I've ever had the pleasure of, working under. And I think anyone that has the opportunity to meet you, we'll see that those things are very much true. So thank you for taking the time to share with our listeners and also to continue to share your light with us.
Oh, thanks so much, Devin. That means a lot. And hope you and the families are well. Please tell everyone I said hello. You and your family are no strangers to me whatsoever. So I still remember the days you'd walk into Old Navy and you'd all be there. And so I think this is a great platform. So thank you to the both of you for creating another platform where we can share and learn, especially for the dance community, because I don't think there's such thing as too many resources for the community. So I appreciate what you're doing. And, however I can continue to support the both of you with this endeavor, don't hesitate to reach out. So thank you.
Please don't bring your friends.
Thank you so much for listening to the Collab podcast.
If you enjoyed this episode, please show your support by leaving a review on iTunes.
And be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcast.
The conversation continues over on Instagram and YouTube with highlights from today's episode.
When you on the way, make that move. Can't stay dead, no, that's my boo. Yeah, that's boo.